Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying SAP S4HANA. I'm Faisal, SAP consultant at PwC.
And I'm Thorsten Hübsch, a partner at PwC and leading the SAP practice in Belgium and the European Center of Excellence for Sub-Strategy.
Very special episode. In this one, we will look at the lessons learned from past S4HANA transformations. And of course, Thorsten already mentioned you are kind of the man of the first hours, having managed the first one, but also some of the largest S4HANA transformations. You must have tons of stuff to talk about, very interesting. And when it comes to lessons learned, I'm very curious what you have to tell about this.
Yes, right. We have really tons of lessons learned. Some are more generic, some are very specific. However, when we look at it and also in the sessions that I had with the clients, I've also seen that the lessons learned are not applying in the same way with the same importance to every client. So we see that actually that every organization has its own challenges, and then the one or the other lessons learned is applying more, but also own strength, where some people just say, listen, I know that this is not a big problem. But of course, this is really different and very specific to each one. I, therefore, over the years, actually started to consider the lessons learned a bit as a kind of a toolbox. And when coming then to a client and seeing which actual work has to be done, I'm then assessing what is then relevant for the context. So some organizations struggle with managing projects in general. Organizations which have not gone through a lot of changes in the past and are not used to projects, for them it's already difficult in general to run projects. Other organizations have difficulties to take decisions and then to stick to them. And again, other organizations might have issues in the IT governance. We know it after 2008, there were a lot of cost cutting in IT. IT was seen as a cost center, which was supposed to be reduced a lot. And of course, the fallout can be seen then a lot of times in the IT organization, in the governance, in the IT support processes. And then, of course, if you then do an S4HANA project, it is landing not necessarily in a well-prepared environment. And so, again, this can be a challenge in another organization. And then different lessons learned are applying. So every organization is different. And so, therefore, specific lessons learned should be taken into consideration to make or to avoid making the mistakes that others have done before, and really start already at the learning curve on a higher level than if you would not look into the past. In the meantime, Faisal in 2015, the first S4HANA version introduced, also my first project. So this is now, in the meantime, almost 10 years ago. So a lot of things could have been learned from the first adopters.
Time flies by when you're having fun, right?
Yeah, indeed. Right.
But, when I looked into our documents that we share, when, for example, customers ask you for lessons learned, I was pretty overwhelmed. If not mistaken, you mentioned 24 and added the remark that this collection has by far not the ambition to be completed.
Yes, that's right, Faisal. This document can be pretty scary. So the relevant lessons learned that we identified can actually be a bit subdivided as well. So the 24 that you mentioned are partly lessons learned around program management and business-specific topics, and actually roughly the other half is more related to IT-specific topics. So this also in a project is typically something that we see is in the different phases of the projects more relevant and others less relevant. So this would be already a first way on tackling this huge amount of elements that we have identified over the past years.
Okay, but let's start with the first one, program and business specific ones.
Yes, absolutely. There's also the relevant, actually the relevant lessons learned to start a project. So let me start with it, and if please stop me if it goes too far too long. Ask the questions when things are not clear. That sometimes for me, being already here in the game for many years, seem to be very clear. So
I will.
one of the first elements is that a lot of times these projects are considered to be IT projects. And sometimes when I mention that to clients, they say, "Oh, we have chosen for a brownfield, so there is actually not much business transformation needed." And so, for me, naturally, this SAP transformation should be in the IT more positioned. This is a big risk to go down that road. One, it is always good to have a sponsor and an owner which is placed in the business, because it should not be considered as an activity within IT, simply because also a brownfield, a so-called brownfield, we will come back in a later episode on the different colors. Also, a brownfield is an upgrade project which is massive. In the meantime, comes also with a whole number of changes. Already a bit of a sneak preview for later episodes. These required changes, but also sometimes changes that are not mandatory. They're all called so-called simplification items by SAP. And these have absolute business impact. So not involving business closely, even if going for the, let's say, least invasive transformation approach, which is a brownfield at the end, would definitely create a lot of risks that the project does not get the right, let's say, standing in the organization, and therefore is then suffering lack of attention and potentially also lack of power to pull through all the way to the finish line. So that's the first one of the 12 that we have here in front of us. The next one is also a very important one. Very often we see that actually the value of S/4HANA is not leveraged. And if you go back a couple episodes, we went in the typical customer journey, and when we tackled the why question, there was a lot of discussion about identifying the value of the S/4HANA transformation. We have seen that a couple of organizations are actually just trying to focus on the upgrade itself, where at the end we have received nothing else than the same that we had before, just with a sticker of S/4HANA on the servers. So most of the customers did not, of the end users did not see any of the additional value, although that it would have been easy to integrate the one or the other improvement that S/4HANA brings. So everyone was considering all the changes as, let's say, a hurdle or an impediment or a stress, instead of looking into it, what could this mean for the business? We have a couple of, and now becoming a bit technical, if we look to the big things that definitely have to change. So in case, for example, you're still operating with classic GL, it's basically mandatory to move to a new GL when operating with S/4HANA. And that, of course, brings also possibilities and added values that the finance department, for example, can leverage. So, for example, the document split. So you can have incoming invoices that you are basically posting on different cost elements. If your business is not aware of that improvement and that new possibility and is not leveraging it, you might just miss out on something where you have invested a lot of euros or US dollars or other currencies in this transformation journey, but something your business was actually waiting for in order to operate better was actually missed. So identifying the value and then also leveraging that value, which comes with tracking the value realization. So also this is something which we have as a lessons learned. It's not enough to identify the value in the beginning. it's also important that on a regular basis we check in and see, are we on track, that these things are actually realized with the project. Is a big lessons learned to put that as a, let's say, as a mandatory element throughout the whole project, to have in every steerco the value slide checking, are we on track on that? Are we about to forget about something? But maybe also to say, listen, we add a certain value proposition that comes with S4HANA during a project. So this is a second big lessons learned, to focus on value, and then also to decide which ones I aim to leverage with introducing S4HANA. So that was the second one. Another one is that we see that in a lot of organizations, the impact is underrated. So let me explain, but maybe it's also a bit self-explanatory. A lot of S4 transformations, especially the brownfields, are again considered as an upgrade, which is not that big of a deal. We are now looking back 10 years to 8 different versions of S4HANA that are now 2024 available. In case you listen to this podcast later, you might even have further new releases. And so it means there is quite some change in comparison to your sub ERP system. And also, basically, when, for example, changing the deployment model from an on-premise to a cloud model, but also when looking at how many resources do you need for such a project internally, then we have a lot of possibilities that the impact on your organization, on your processes, on the resource needs is basically underrated when you then look back and say, oh my goodness, if we would have planned that more in detail, we could have known that. And here, maybe, Faisal, let me stress that everything that you plan in advance, of course, becomes less of a hassle and less of a risk when executing the project itself. So going into things prepared, and you will come across enough things that you did not anticipate. The unknowns that are not yet clear at the beginning of a project.
For sure.
Yeah, and this is then basically, if you're not able then to compensate that with a well-planned and well-anticipated impact analysis, that this becomes a hassle. Are you ready for more, Faisal?
Yes, bring it on.
So another, we are now at number 4 on the list to give you a bit of a status progress update, is that a lot of projects are having like the end of the project, which is normal. The definition of a project, it's a unique set of activities with unique outcome and a defined beginning and a defined end, to have maybe a concise definition for projects. That also the horizon and the vision ends with the go live. And seriously, in actually all the projects that I have seen, a lot of activities then start just after that. So if you go, for example, through a brownfield, through an upgrade project where you upgrade your old system, it's just your first step, because only then you have, with the go live, your new platform where all the improvement projects would follow on. So I really encourage everyone to have a project horizon that does not end with the go live and the switch to S4HANA, but that basically has a multi-year roadmap taken into account, where all these initiatives are on there. This is important from multiple perspectives. One, it's a bit like also when maybe running a marathon or something like that. If you know after 42 kilometers it's over, then you can only run 42 kilometers. But if you know it's a couple of kilometers more, then of course you're also prepared. So it's all about expectation management. It's about giving the broader vision, the longer vision. Also being aware that you need to save a couple of energies for the time after, but also giving expectation management to the business, in a sense of, you will not get everything during go live, there is a roadmap, and you can actually already see when you will receive which kind of capability in IT, in your SAP system, in the ecosystem of your S4, by which time, and you have then an active discussion with it. And last but not least, also that you give an overview on, let's say, a possibility to plan investments. So the S4HANA project is a massive investment. None of the, let's say, big sponsors should think that this will be the end of investments in the SAP domain. A lot of times we see that in brownfields, for example, we do the bare minimum, but also in greenfield installations, so in new installations, we try, of course, to limit the scope in the beginning in order to limit risks, in order to limit change impact, etc., and that we put then other projects on the road map after the actual go live. So many reasons to summarize: have a project horizon that does not end with the go live, but goes much beyond that and sees or takes into account a multi-year transformation journey. Number 4 is done. Shall we continue?
Let's go to 5.
Yeah. So another big lessons learned is that in a lot of projects, risks and risk management is not emphasized enough. So I have been involved in multiple assessments, and basically what I can see is that we have projects that fit into different buckets. The one is risk is not managed at all. So when I then ask project managers, when I ask steerco members, are you monitoring risks? Do you have that in your steerco sessions discussed? Very often I see that this is taken very lightly. This is maybe just a formality, but people are not looking at it. So this is like the first group where risk management is also almost not existing. We then have a second group which basically identifies risks but doesn't do much with it. So basically there we see that we have a risk register, but we don't have, for example, a risk owner. We don't have a mitigation strategy. And we have also no follow-up on that mitigation strategy. So this is like the second one. Also, you can look at it a bit like as maturity. But the big lessons learned is to really emphasize a lot on the risk management, simply because these multi-year projects, of course, also tend to have changing risks over time. No? Again, I mentioned in the past episodes, we had, for example, the time when we had COVID, and there we had that we could see that very vividly. Of course, if you plan a project with on-site presence, cool stuff, but then COVID hits, and all of a sudden, you will have completely different project risks due to the fact that you can't come together anymore, that you will face difficulties in communication, in alignment, in progress also, simply, because decisions take longer to take if it's all of a sudden a remote setup. So I think this illustrates a lot that risk management should be part from the very first day, should be discussed broadly, should also not be a necessary evil, but should be something basically that you create a radar for your project where things could go wrong, and that you early enough identify the risks itself, that you assign owners who are accountable and responsible for taking care of it with the necessary mandate, and then also that you follow up on the mitigation strategies that you have identified. A lot to talk about, but I keep it with that. But I think you're curious on number 6, aren't you?
Of course, I am. Listeners as well, the listeners as well.
Yeah, so number 6 is basically coming back from the discussions of the past years, which were also very often under the umbrella of we do all agile. This is lessons learned number 6 is to apply certain project methodology without doing a proper assessment before whether it's the right fit for your organization. So I mentioned it in a past episode. If you go, for example, on a pure agile project methodology, and you take as a first project your S4HANA transformation, this might not be the right way to go. So do try to actually beef it up. Now my screen is going down.
We'll just pause and maybe
restart
with 6. Huh?
Yeah, okay. So Faisal, I'm sure you're curious on number 6, aren't you?
Yes, of course. I assume the listeners as well.
Yes. So the number 6 is actually referring back to observations from the past years when I was also pulled into projects where I saw that the project methodology that is applied is not necessarily a good fit to the organization and to the context. So in short, the lessons learned is never apply a project methodology without a proper assessment, whether this is actually serving the purpose, whether this is actually fitting to the project team and to the organizational culture of an organization. So in a nutshell, we see actually 3 different types. We see the classic old waterfall, which still in certain areas has all its justification. So, for example, in the context of public services, we see that very much still being applied. We see on the other hand side pure agile methodologies, which have actually turned out to be not very well suited to an S4HANA transformation. If I say that, and maybe people from SAP themselves are listening, they might get stuck a bit and say, well, but we are developing our solution in a very agile manner with continuous delivery methodologies and continuous integration and continuous deployment. Yes, this is certainly true for the development of the solution, for the product. But when going through an ERP implementation project, then we have seen that actually only in very few cases pure agile methodologies turned out to be the best choice, because you have to have already a lot of experience with agile project management, with agile project approaches, in order to be really from the first day spot on to actually execute that. An ERP system is a highly integrated system with many stakeholders involved. If you just take a supply chain process, so forecast to plan, for example, as a process, integrated process, you have from so many different areas people involved. If you would do that in an agile manner, this would simply mean that you have a very big overhead with very slow progress. So that brings me actually to the third big, let's say, category of, as we always hear, the hybrid one, doing parts of it in waterfall methodology and parts of it in agile, which over the years also became a bit like the gold standard. So there are, of course, big disadvantages of pure waterfall project approaches. That means in the past we had it like long design phases with big blueprints that took not very often even took a year to create. And then it was signed off, and then all of a sudden the project team disappeared and was all busy in building the solution, and it took another year. And very often we had then the situation that the business was asking for a car and basically got a bicycle, and in between this process had not the chance to adjust a bit the creation and the implementation of it. And so there we had also big mismatches in terms of expectation management. The project sometimes also got a bit forgotten because business was not involved anymore. All that is certainly not ideal. We have overcome that. We also see that in the project methodologies that SAP provides. In the past, we had the so-called ASAP methodology that in the meantime does not exist anymore. It was a pure waterfall methodology. There was for a short time agile flavor to it. But if we now look at Sub-Activate, which is the methodology that's now around, this is one of these hybrid methodologies that goes in the beginning waterfall-like, and then as of the, let's say, realization phase, also goes into an, iterative agile-like approach.
Which we talked about in the previous episode, by the way.
Absolutely.
If you're interested into this SAP Activate, I'm referring to the 6th episode that Thorsten discussed with me.
Yeah. So, and that basically brings us to the conclusion of number 6. Let's go further.
Lucky number 7.
Yes, number 7, indeed. Logically, that we are not skipping anyone. A lot of times, organizations struggle with the magnitude of that. So, normally, if we don't have an organization that is used to projects also from their business, so let's take, for example, a manufacturing company which is very good in processes. So that is basically having a high focus on process excellence, but it's not changing very frequently. Such a project comes with an enormous magnitude of resource needs of these people who are actually working in processes highly optimized, usually 100%, more than 100% occupied with the day-to-day business. And all of a sudden, the project team is requesting from them quite some time being involved in discussions, in decision-making, in testing, in signing off, in all kinds of conversations to make this project progress and succeed at the end. And this magnitude is also, I mentioned it before, there are also the unknowns that come across such a project. This is very difficult to estimate in the beginning, but also we see very often that these estimations are not sufficiently done. So we have seen in a lot of projects that customers ask our efforts, which is great, which we of course provide and is the basis for our proposals, but completely forget to have honest evaluation how many resources are needed internally to actually execute such a project. And there, having then also the assessment and judgment to say, okay, is that doable? And this would also lead to basically a consciousness of maybe I had an ambition of X, Y, Z for a project, but looking now to reality, looking to what I would be able to accomplish as an organization, I might need to reconsider an approach which is more lightweight. And for example, in the first version is incorporating less changes and is more is closer to the solution that I have. So here, lessons learned very clearly. Assess well the magnitude and put elements in place like backfilling from the beginning so that the people who you need in order to execute that project internally are then also available and have the possibility to participate so the project is not suffering delay or lack of quality. I think tick in the box for number 7.
Yeah, number 8.
Number 8. So also this I mentioned in one of the past episodes, just in a side remark, that sometimes projects are still set up in very much in silo. So we have the finance, we have procurement, we have sales, a bit like Faisal, as we know from the past with the modules, when we were still looking at SAP more from a module perspective, the FICO module or the SD module or the MM module that most of our listeners probably know. And this, as a lessons learned, is not a good way to structure actually a project. In the meantime, it is really a very good practice and common practice to think in value streams, to think in end-to-end processes. Let's not discuss about the name, but more about having the concept. Let's really have streams into consideration like a record to report, really an end-to-end process where potentially different organizations or different parts of the organizations will be involved. That you define then also for this end-to-end process a process owner that goes across potential silos of your organization, because let's be honest, you will not be able with that project to change your organization. You have to live with what you have, and if you need to do such an S/4HANA transformation in a siloed organization, that means still that you need to, as from the beginning, set up your project with end-to-end processes and make everyone aware of that. In order to succeed, we really have to see that in an integrated manner where these silos need to work together without necessarily changing them. So lessons learned number 8, keep end-to-end processes in focus and do not go on functional domains like we did in the very far past.
Great. Number 9.
Number 9, indeed. This is basically the resource and capacity planning which is very often underrated. So I mentioned it, estimating the resources that we need, and that's one thing. But then also doing an resource management along the project and understanding what is actually my capacity to execute. Because this is something that you will only experience when you start the project and you really feel how much you are actually able to work off in a certain timeline. We see that especially also in Agile project where this is an integrated part. You do your first iterations, you do your first sprints, your first waves, also to experience how much capacity do I have with the people that I have on the project. And this is also true for ERP projects, for S/4HANA projects in general, that you should do on the one hand side a proper resource planning, but then also match that with actuals and get a better understanding on your capacity. Then potentially also adjust plannings, adjust budgets, be transparent to your steerco about that. This should not be seen as a failure. This is simply something that needs to be assessed on the way going once you really focus or you really face the challenges and the tasks in your project. And I would also prepare stakeholders, but also the key decision makers in your organization, that this is in the beginning just an estimate which needs to be validated against actual possibilities, what a team can actually absorb in terms of work. So that's number 9. We move forward. Number 10.
I like number 10.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah. So this is actually addressing an aspect that was the biggest criticism of past SAP system. And it is sometimes forgotten in S/4HANA journeys. On top, which is actually a kind of an strange situation, a lot of SAP ERP customers were very much complaining about the lack of usability. And at the same time, we see a lot of SAP projects, S/4HANA projects, that there is a lack of user centricity. So one of the big motivations to move to a future-proof system to get a state-of-the-art user interface, and then not having any user centricity that we look out of the eyes from an end user, is of course a bit of a contradiction. So make sure that you actually have that you involve the end user perspective very early. That you also put in your change part as part of your change management also what is the expectation in terms of usability, and that you basically have a constant feedback also from your end users. This is sometimes painful, and maybe this is also the reason why this is forgotten, because this is not the most fun exercise, as we all know. everyone wants change, but no one wants to change. And whenever you confront an end user who is working extremely efficiently for years with a certain with certain tricks on, and you ask the person, why don't we move now to this front end, you will very rarely hear that big enthusiasm and happiness. But you can't skip that. Huh? You have to go into the dialogue with the end user, and you have to keep the end user really at in the center, because otherwise this all hits back. Latest at go live, but most likely already at user acceptance test, when the people will go crazy about what they actually have to adopt to. So number 10, lack of user centricity. Is one of the challenges that definitely, as a lessons learned, should be addressed very early.
Let's continue.
11, two to go. 2 to go for the project-specific lessons learned. Number 11 is going on a missing end-to-end view of the requirements to the IT functionality. Don't get confused with the end-to-end processes. Has nothing to do with that. Okay. It is more that you look in these implementation projects, in these S4HANA journeys, from we are starting business capabilities that we have in focus. We go to requirements. We then break down these requirements to work packages and tasks, and we then implement them. And also at the end, then, of course, test them, document them, and so forth. And very often we see that in these projects, there is this, let's say, disconnect, this link between the capability in the beginning and the delivered functionality at the end is missing. So you could say, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem at the very latest is when you try to understand whether your solution is complete. Because then, of course, you have no possibility to validate it against the requirements that you had in the beginning if you don't have a clear end-to-end link in this project. But also later on, imagine you need to support that solution, and you have, for example, an support process setup, which is handling tickets, concerns, problems, etc., or even also audits, that you cannot actually trace back on certain functionalities, certain settings, certain customizings that you have been that you did in the system, that you cannot connect that to why did you actually do that. So this missing end-to-end view from the requirement to an IT functionality is something that is definitely tackled with the latest tools like Cloud ALM, but was also the case if projects had been carried out with Solution Manager focused build. But sometimes this is not the case, that these tools are used. And then we definitely see that we actually have no possibility at the end to check if a solution is complete, and also do not have the chance to hand it over to a support organization that then understands if they get a mistake or a problem in an area, that they understand what was actually the reason why certain things have been implemented. Want to go?
One more
for the project challenges, and that is an extremely important one. We are talking about longer projects. We are talking about projects where you need to have the people committed over a longer time. And here we face very often the challenge of a stable core team. And here it is, of course, not an easy job to guarantee that, because, of course, we know organizations tick with hierarchies. Organizations tick with incentive structures. So all that needs to be aligned, that core people will not try to leave the project after a year. They need to be basically encouraged with all the measures that an organization has available to stick to the very end, in order to guarantee continuity, in order to also guarantee, let's say, the red thread, the continuous thread in the in storyline of such a solution build. And so the lack of a stable core team is seen as one of the biggest challenges. Of course, the longer a project takes, and in big organization, an S4 transformation can easily take more than 2 to 3 years. We have seen transformations of even 5 years. And then to have like the essence of a team still stable is a challenge that definitely needs to be tackled from the very beginning, when hiring the people, when attracting the people, all the way to, let's say, go live. And if people offboard, that this then also is basically safeguarded with good handovers, with good documentation from the first day on. Because something that we also see very regularly is the longer a project takes, the more, let's say, the more history is to it, the more specific elements are to it, which makes it difficult to onboard new people. So again, if you have then a stable core team, coming back to that challenge and lessons learned at the same time, is an absolute guarantee that you will not face problems later on.
That was already quite a package, right?
Definitely also quite some time down the road.
Yes, thank you, Thorsten, indeed. We are grateful to hear your experience and all your lessons learned. However, to not make this episode too long, we will continue with some more insights in the next episode. So hit that subscribe button, all your listeners, and share it with whoever might be interested. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.